Well, welcome to our session on addressing the unmet needs in glaucoma. You've already heard, I'm Ron Feldman, Leon Herndon, we're our moderators for this session. We put together, I think, a really good session. And in the essence of time, I'm going to skip over some of the things that I was going to talk about as an intro, but I want you to know there is a formal article on addressing the unmet needs in primary open-angle glaucoma by the American Glaucoma Society and ASCRS. It's in Ophthalmology Glaucoma, I think in September of 2022, by Crawford Downs and David Fleischman. So if you want to read about it in a little bit more scientific way, you can do that. But we put together something where we have industry and healthcare and the patient's perspective and the research scientist. So it's a little bit different perspective, but I think it's one that I think you'll enjoy hearing. So we're going to get right to it. I'm going to ask Raphael Chan to come up. He's Vice President of Global Affairs for Alcon and has an amazing job right now. So we wanted to know, what's some of the unmet needs of industry? What is their viewpoint? Raphael.
Thank you, Dr. Feldman and Dr. Herndon, for the introduction and the opportunity to speak. And I know that we're running a little bit behind schedule, so I'll try to speed it up as much as possible. So when we think about unmet needs, number one, I just wanted to mention that Alcon has a broad portfolio related to lowering intraocular pressure. We're grateful to be back in the pharmaceutical space with the acquisition of Aerie that we closed at the beginning of last year. So we've got a broad portfolio with Rocklatan, Ropressa, and also with acquiring back the asset of Simbrinza a few years ago. And of course, we're very fortunate to have Hydrus in our portfolio as well as we continue to expand the utilization of this product, not only in the US, but also as we look forward to expanding this product in key markets like China and Japan over the next 9 to 12 months. Now, I promise you I did not look at Ike's slides prior to this, but I would say 99.9% of what he said is probably going to be repeated here during my presentation, but just more from the industry point of view. As many of you know, we have a large presence in cataract surgery, and you can see the numbers here, and I think they corroborate with what MarketScope also has. There's roughly 5 million cataract procedures in the United States, and if you believe the publications that have come out over the past 15 to 20 years in terms of the prevalence of open-angle glaucoma in patients undergoing cataract surgery, we should expect roughly 735,000 MIGS procedures, if you will, on an annual basis. However, when you take a look at the slide or the graph here on the left-hand side, you can see the current penetration of angle-based procedures. That includes not only the stents, but also the other canal-based procedures. The overall penetration of MIGS procedures at the time of cataract surgery is still in the 40% range. And so while the glaucoma community is championing the interventional glaucoma mindset, glaucoma specialists can't shoulder the burden alone, right? We're going to have to partner with comprehensive ophthalmologists to make sure they have this mindset and not just pass on these patients who could be treated earlier and pass these patients on to glaucoma fellowship trained surgeons. And so we need the broader ophthalmic community to adopt an interventional mindset, much like the way that we're looking at astigmatism correction at the time of cataract surgery. And so we need to partner with the individuals in this room and also with societies like AAO, ASCRS, ESCRS, others, to number one, simplify the treatment paradigm. There are several technologies out there, and of course, Dr. Ahmed and others have shown the various treatment algorithms, and so we're going to have to simplify the treatment paradigm, and I think this is going to come to, we're going to head that way with improvements in diagnostics and also some of the technologies. We're going to have to simplify it so that way comprehensives can find a better way to interpret all this information. Number two, we're going to have to better define treatment success. And I think treatment success can vary depending on the types of products and depending on where the disease is. And so hopefully we can better define this and make it easier and more simple for comprehensive ophthalmologists to comprehend and understand. The third point is generating and leveraging quality medical evidence. We saw the impact of the local coverage determinations, which were fortunately overturned this past December, but still that causes a lot of confusion and frustration for comprehensive ophthalmologists who are thinking about getting into angle-based procedures. And so it's going to be incumbent upon industry to work with ophthalmologists and also with the regulators to make sure that we're investing in high quality medical evidence that meets the required endpoints to make sure that not only do we get coverage or reimbursement, but probably more importantly, establish coverage for all these technologies. And certainly last but not least, it's a mindset shift, as Dr. Ahmed just mentioned. We need to make sure that we're training residents and fellows not just on basic cataract surgery, but also on intraoperative gonioscopy, and also some of these new technologies that are coming out that are fantastic. And so we want to make sure that we're partnering with the academic institutions in the US and also outside the US, so that way they can adopt some of these newer technologies and not just be stuck with older procedures, which are still necessary, as Dr. Ahmed mentioned, but we want to make sure that we're teaching this interventional glaucoma mindset, not just within this room, but within the broader ophthalmic community and also to the future ophthalmologists out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Raphael. Now to represent the clinicians and researchers in the room, Jeffrey Goldberg, Chair of Ophthalmology and Director of the Byers Eye Institute, Stanford, and co-founder of Peripherex. Jeff.
All right, thank you. Thank you. Wearing my Stanford hat now. Unmet needs in glaucoma. I'm going to focus here on measuring visual function and restoring visual function. And truly, although we are always looking to optimize lowering eye pressure as knocking out that risk factor for glaucoma, we really want to remember it's the retinal ganglion cells in the back of the eye and their fibers carrying vision down the optic nerve that degenerate in glaucoma and, of course, in all the other optic neuropathies. And that really is our target in glaucoma therapy. And although right now, clinically, our target is fairly narrowly focused on how do we lower eye pressure, we really need to think about broadening that focus, both for diagnostics and for therapeutics. So as I mentioned, of course, we're looking for better pharmacologic and surgical IOP lowering approaches. We also need better biomarkers, better ways to measure who has glaucoma. Half the people in the world who have glaucoma, we don't even know who they are. And 100% of the patients with glaucoma, we don't know whether they're going to get worse and when, or how rapidly they're going to get worse. So we need better measures to diagnose glaucoma, but also to see who's getting worse or predict who's getting worse. And that, I think, is a major unmet need as it stands today. We use visual field, we look at the optic nerve, we look at nerve fiber layer thinning, at least earlier in the disease. What we really need to do is be looking for things like loss of specific retinal ganglion cell subtypes inside the eye, looking at structure or function. We need to look at loss of metabolic function. I want to look at a patient and say, hey, I don't want to say, you got worse over the last 3 years, let's advance your therapy. I want to say, your retina is metabolically unhappy today, you're going to get worse, I'm going to intervene now and prevent that from happening. We're doing a couple of different approaches to that, testing new technologies at Stanford. One of them is actually putting on a hairnet and doing your visual field by measuring your brain waves. Much easier on the patient, they just get to look at a computer screen. But importantly, we discovered through this process that actually glaucoma patients, there's different types of cells in our eye. Some of the cells actually know when the lights turn on, and others are important at measuring when the lights go off. And it turns out that our off cells are more sensitive, but glaucoma patients lose those off cells earlier than the on cells. And so we're identifying ways to better identify early loss and progression in glaucoma. Similarly, new technologies like visible light OCT that can better define retinal layers and identify subtypes of retinal ganglion cells that may allow us to measure disease before it's too late. So we've had things like structure with OCT, but now we've got visible light OCT, adaptive optics. For function, we've traditionally used visual fields, but now we can use visually evoked potentials, brainwaves. And I think most exciting, metabolism. We've been exploring OCT angiography, but new areas like measuring mitochondria with the Ocumet technologies and others, laser speckle flowgraphy, I think these are technologies that are really going to make a difference. And again, visible light OCT that can also do not just structure, but also oxygen metabolism in the retina. Finally, leveraging these new ways to measure, we really need better treatments that go beyond eye pressure treatments. We really need things like neuroprotection, keeping our retinal ganglion cells alive, regeneration, growing back down the optic nerve, and what we call neuroenhancement, which is a term that we've stolen from the Alzheimer's crowd, which means taking your sick retinal ganglion cells and giving them a boost. And we know that biologically this is plausible because in glaucoma there's an early insult that leads to all sorts of metabolic pathophysiologies. The axons get damaged, but it's only sometime later that the retinal ganglion cells die. So there is a window in between damage and death that we can intervene for neuroprotection and neuroenhancement. We're thinking about that not just in terms of treating the neurons, but now new discoveries are leading us to think about treating the supporting glial cells. And so we've got a new class of gliotherapeutics coming up. We actually have a paper coming out next week on a switch from turning bad astrocytes reacting in glaucoma and optic nerve damage into good astrocytes so that these neuroprotective astrocytes can inhibit the immune response, inhibit the neurotoxic response, promote retinal ganglion cell survival, keep retinal ganglion cells and their fibers alive in the optic nerve. Now, most exciting, I think, especially in this crowd, is to think about the science moving from the lab to the clinic. And again, the old thinking was that neuroprotection would take too long to measure. These trials would be too long. It'd be implausible to do clinical trials. And I think that with new thinking that's faster to detect things like neuroenhancement and also leveraging these new biomarkers, we actually have a real shot and in fact are showing we can start doing actual clinical trials for neuroprotection and the like. So we've got actually a handful that we've done at Stanford and a couple elsewhere over the years, looking at nerve growth factor eye drops and seeing some potential improvement in nerve fiber layer around the optic nerve. CNTF implants that are showing some positive effects on visual field and not just structure as well. Protecting against cell death, a company that we're not doing this at Stanford yet, looking at fast ligand blockade. Protecting synapses with antibodies against complement C1q. We did the phase 1b clinical trial at Stanford and showed complete, like 100% target engagement in our glaucoma patients. Promoting activity with visual stimulation, we did a test trial and now we're doing studies at Stanford on electrical stimulation, sending patients home where they can get small pulses of current put into their retinas and showing some positive effects there already. Boosting metabolism, studies with hyperbaric oxygen, and very exciting right now, B3 nicotinamide. Two positive studies out of Columbia and Melbourne showing that B3 had positive effects on patients with glaucoma's visual function measures, and there are now 5 clinical trials going on around the world, including one between Columbia and Stanford here in the US. These are phase 3 style trials to really ask and prove the point, is nicotinamide going to help our patients with glaucoma? We just finished a phase 1 trial with insulin, using insulin as an eye drop based on Adriana DiPolo's work, funded by the Glaucoma Research Foundation, showing that eye drops of insulin are actually improving the structure of the ganglion cell layer. We're now getting ready to do a longer-term functional assay with these patients. So, new thinking, trial design improvements, we can study neuroprotection, we can study neuroenhancement, we're incorporating these new exploratory biomarkers, and I think we've got great therapeutic candidates coming out of the laboratories that we can move into patients and move from fantasy to reality. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Goldberg. Now we're going to move on. Going to have Brandy Keys from the American Academy of Ophthalmology. She's Director of Health Policy, and she'll give us her viewpoint in addressing the unmet needs.
Great, thank you so much for that introduction. Happy to be here today. Like Dr. Feldman said, I work for the American Academy of Ophthalmology in the DC office, so I work mainly on the regulatory side. And that's where we're going to focus today. I'll be speaking to how we can address unmet needs from a coverage and reimbursement policy perspective. Let's see how this works. All right, there we go. I have no relevant disclosures. So following Medicare coverage and reimbursement policies is one of the key responsibilities of my team at the Academy. Honestly, it keeps me up at night sometimes. We need to stay vigilant because these policies like local coverage determinations, affect not only Medicare beneficiaries, but we see these policies trickle down to commercial payers, to Medicare Advantage and Medicaid. I'm going to get a little bit wonky here because, you know, I'm from DC. So don't worry if you don't know what an LCD is yet. The Social Security Act gives Medicare administrative contractors, these are the folks that Medicare CMS hires to administer benefits, it gives them the authority to create their own special coverage and reimbursement policies specific to their jurisdiction. The MACs can revise or retire these policies on their own initiative, or a beneficiary or stakeholder, including medical professional societies, an individual clinician, physician, or a manufacturer can request for these policies, the LCD, to be revised. And that kickstarts the open public comment period of the LCD reconsideration process. An excellent and timely case study of the LCD reconsideration process occurred just last year for the MIGS procedures. The Academy, the American Glaucoma Society, the American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery, and the Outpatient Ophthalmic Surgery Society dedicated a large part of last year to fighting to maintain patient access to MIGS treatments. You all lived this as well and are probably still in shock the way I am, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this timeline here, though I did want to show it because I think that it reflects how much work we put into this process. So briefly, in June 2023, 5 of the 7 MACs released proposed LCDs for MIGS. These policies would have severely restricted access. So our ophthalmology coalition that I just talked about launched a multifaceted advocacy campaign. We wrote countless letters to CMS and the MACs. We participated in open public meetings. We met with the MAC contract medical directors, the CMDs, multiple times. We engaged our congressional champions, and then we also leveraged our state society advocates as well. And our efforts paid off because at the end of last year, December 28th, nice holiday present, the MACs retired these final policies before they ever went into effect. And we know that collaboration is what led to this advocacy win. But we can't rest on our laurels. We may have won the battle, but the war is not won yet. The MACs will likely come back with new revised policies. We don't know when exactly, but when that happens, we know that this process will start all over again and we'll have to re-engage our coalition. For now, we know that continuing engagement with the CMDs is a must. And this applies to any innovation. I'm talking about MIGS right now, but for those of you in the audience who may think about a new device or drug product, this applies. The MACs the CMDs look to us for guidance. So it's very important to make those connections with the CMDs. There's usually one assigned at every MAC to ophthalmology specifically. So when our ophthalmology coalition met with the CMDs on December 13th, we committed to helping them develop common sense coverage criteria as an alternative to these 2 never before seen restrictions that came out in the final policies we saw last year. We worked through the first one, so don't worry about the first one. We worked through that verbally with the CMDs, and they confirmed that it's not just things that go through the traditional FDA approval pathways. They don't mean to restrict coverage to things that go through like 510K pathway and get clearance. So that one's worked out. However, it's the second requirement for demonstrated effectiveness that's not quite as easy and that we are working on. It's clear that the CMDs are savvy readers of the literature that's out there, and they're not going to be convinced by poor quality studies. They recognize that glaucoma is a chronic condition, and they want to see 24-month data. ideally showing a slowing of glaucoma-related vision loss. What you see on the screen now is taken directly from their response to our comments on the proposed policies, and they've pointed out multiple shortcomings in the available MIGS literature at that time, which we need industry to help us address. So I'll end on our unmet need and a call to action for you all. We know that the MACs aren't satisfied and that they're likely going to reintroduce proposed LCDs probably later this year. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We're probably going to be doing the same thing this summer. There is a need for more high-quality literature that is clinically relevant with well-defined primary endpoints, has long-term follow-up more than a year. RCTs are great. However, it's not always necessary. The MACs have indicated that they will accept case control studies, comparator groups, and they also want diverse samples that represent the disease burden. So if you do research, or if you have a product or are developing a product, please keep that in mind. We encourage you to spend the time and resources to produce better evidence so that current and future glaucoma patients can have access to the best innovative technologies. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy. So the last speaker in our panel is the reason we're all here. Tonia McDonald's the glaucoma patient from Jamaica. We're so happy that she's able to join us and share with us her perspectives. Tonia?
Good morning, everyone. Today I want to extend a warm welcome from Jamaica. But today I am not just your speaker, I am also a glaucoma patient, offering you a glimpse into the world, or rather through the lens of someone living with glaucoma. The journey with glaucoma requires resilience. It's marked by celebrating small victories. It's like watching our loved one smile or seeing the sunrise. Today, my goal is to connect the clinical understanding of glaucoma with the real experiences of those of us living with it. Beyond the medical jargons, the statistics, we are real people with real stories navigating a world that is over time overshadowed by challenges. I won't dwell on definitions, type, causes, impacts, because we're all familiar with it. But instead, I'll share with you what are 3 unmet needs for those of us living with glaucoma. First up is the emotional and psychological need. The truth is, as glaucoma patients, we're always thinking about it. Even when we make a conscious shift in our mindset to not think about glaucoma, we still think about it. Understanding that there's a deep impact on glaucoma on our mental health is crucial. As a glaucoma patient, I wrestle with anxiety, depression, and the biggest of them all is adjusting to my new reality. What I want to do or what I used to do, I can no longer do. So understanding that this has a significant impact on our mental health is crucial. What we would like to see more of is more community groups, social groups that are created that offers a safe platform for those of us as glaucoma patients to share our experiences and coping strategies. It's easier to learn and to listen from someone who knows exactly what we're going through. As the saying says, walk a mile in my shoes. But for this to have real impact, it can't be once a year or once in a blue moon. It has to be monthly, weekly, creating that mentoring system. Each one teaches one. And secondly, having a personalized treatment plan. This is one of the most impactful things that we as patients need. The universal approach does not fit everyone. But outside of having this personalized plan, there is a significantly high cost for glaucoma medication that creates a barrier for us. And oftentimes, the medication that we want is so high, we have to go for an alternative approach, which takes longer to really get results. So let's address the financial constraints so we are able to ensure that everyone has high access, high quality access to affordable glaucoma medications. And thirdly, which is my favorite, nutrition. Doctors treat us, not glaucoma, because we're still human beings too. So nutrition treats the person and not the condition. And I'm drawing inspiration from one of my favorite cartoons, Ratatouille, where Remy says, "If you are what you eat, then I only want to eat the good stuff." And for us as glaucoma patients, our food choices are as critical as it influences how we live our lives. And for glaucoma patients, not all foods are created equally. Similarly to our exercises. If you go to the gym, sometimes it's going to be increasing our eye pressure. So we have to know what those foods are. Knowing the type of foods that are glaucoma friendly can uniquely align with our specific needs. So let's explore some alternative natural remedies that can complement glaucoma management. Not every solution requires a prescription or a surgical procedure. In the wise words of Dr. T. Colin Campbell, good nutrition creates health in all areas of our existence. All parts are interconnected. And to my fellow glaucoma patients out there, keep fighting the good fight. Remember, there's not just one giant step that does it. It's a lot of small steps. Let's continue to make those meaningful steps towards glaucoma. Thank you.
Thank you, Tony. And so I think we're going to have a panel discussion, and we also want some audience input because we have microphones in the aisle. So if you have a question, I think we have a few minutes, right? I think, Andrew?
10 minutes, yeah.
Oh, we have 10 minutes, okay. So I don't see anybody coming up to the mic yet. So I wanted to ask, this is so complex, everything that we just heard. So I want to try and focus just for a minute and go down, starting with Raphael, and I want to ask one question and I have each panelist try to answer, and that is, what do you think, if you could focus in on just one unmet need that you think is most important right now? Because unmet needs means we have a problem with something. So if you wanted to impart one thing, what would it be? And we'll start with Raphael.
Can I say two things? They're somewhat linked.
Yeah, you could do two.
Okay,
It's
okay. So it would be training and access globally.
Training and access?
Training and access globally.
Okay, training ophthalmologists.
Yes.
That's important, incredibly important unmet need. So training ophthalmologists. Okay, so that's a big one. And
Right.
number two again? What was your
Access, very similar to what Brandy was saying. I mean, not just in the U.S., but globally.
access to?
Access to modern therapies, whether it's, pharmaceutical therapies or surgical therapies. Because remember, I think in most cases, sorry I'm going a little longer, but in most cases, I think we're very fortunate here in the U.S. where there is a MIGS market per se. Outside the U.S., the MIGS market really isn't that developed because right now the incentives aren't aligned. There isn't a lot of access to, let's say, whether it's stents or other canal-based procedures. Modern glaucoma surgery is still TRABs.
Okay.
So, I think those two go hand in hand in terms of being able to train properly, have the appropriate data to convince payers to say it's worthwhile to invest in these modern procedures beyond just doing a trabeculectomy.
Okay, thank you. Training and access. Okay, Jeff, Dr. Goldberg, you're going to focus in for me. Most important unmet need.
I don't want to disagree with access, worldwide access. You know, glaucoma is a big cause of vision loss in the U.S., but it's the #1 cause of irreversible loss in the world. And so I just want to reinforce what Raphael just said. But I'll add to that and just say, you know, we treat diabetes with medications to lower blood sugar, but also ACE inhibitors to protect the kidney and keep the blood pressure down as a secondary factor. Right now, we are only treating the risk factor for glaucoma of eye pressure lowering, really, when you boil it down. And so something that directly addresses the retinal and optic nerve degeneration, a neuroprotection type of approach, something that allows us to do belt and suspenders, something that makes eye pressure lowering not the only approach, something that complements eye pressure lowering in that regard. And that's where I think the importance of really pushing the science forward and getting some sort of neuroprotection regeneration treatments out on the market that specifically address the optic nerve degeneration and can complement eye pressure lowering for our patients. And I'll say, you know, in the US and abroad.
That's a good summary. Brandy?
Hello. Okay, great. Well, I'll switch gears a little bit because I'm coming from the advocacy perspective, the policy perspective. I would say just an understanding from the glaucoma specialist and the manufacturers that times have changed. FDA approval does not automatically give you coverage and reimbursement from payers. So we need to adapt that thinking as a community and meeting the needs of the research, translating that to coverage and reimbursement so that we can maintain access.
So we're hearing that times have changed. We need Bob Dylan here to sing that one, I think. Tonya.
For me, it would be the financial costs that we as glaucoma patients have to endure to get adequate or high quality treatment. And sometimes it's, well, not sometimes, but all the time, it's very expensive. And if you want to get that high quality, you have to dig deep in your pocket. And sometimes you may not be able to afford it. So you have to go for an alternative option that takes a longer time to get real results. And we all know with glaucoma, time is very important. Yeah.
Great. All good points.
I've got a question for Jeff. And Jeff, I know you get asked this question all the time because my patients ask me all the time. Doc, when will we have optic nerve regeneration? I've been doing this for 28 years. And the answer I get from the experts is 10 years, 10 years, 10 years. So what are you saying now?
You know, my wife asks me when I'm going to get home. I tell her 1 hour. I'll leave in 1 hour. The other thing I point out, I mentioned this to a couple people in the audience last night as we were coming down. My mother had a sign outside the bathroom. It said, "How long a minute is depends on which side of the door you're on." So look, the science, we've got to push it faster. You know, we are grateful that we have great academic, philanthropic, and industry partnership across that spectrum. The science is finally moving from the laboratory into actual human trials. You know, we're proud to help take a lead on that, but we're seeing that spread now. I think we've sort of broken the ice, and I think we're seeing even big pharma and large industry strategic partners step into the neuroprotection game, both for retina disease and glaucoma disease. And so I think maybe we're coming to that actual 10 years ahead, Leon. Yeah.
So we have, what, a minute left? So we have, let's do two quick.
I just want to say,
Here's Bob, go ahead, Bob.
Nobody mentioned how user-unfriendly are some of our treatments for glaucoma are. And I know that there are people working on it, but I think we need to get medication delivery systems that are much more user-friendly for the patients.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we got one last question from the audience.
Very quickly, thank you for an incredible panel. So Jeff, I wanted to ask you in terms of what do you think is top of the list in terms of potential for cell and gene therapy for glaucoma? and Tony, how do you evaluate for your life these new advances and what you adopt versus, don't? How do you evaluate that risk for you personally?
Well, if we take it in order, I'll just say I think what's really exciting about cell and gene therapy is the idea that some of those therapies could be one and done, or one and decades of effect, which for glaucoma could buy us enough time for most of our patients. And what's exciting is that those are being looked at both for the anterior part of the eye, where we could maybe permanently or semi-permanently lower eye pressure by changing the biology of outflow at the trabecular meshwork and elsewhere with cell or gene therapy, and also in the back of the eye where we could replace, restore, protect vision in a way that could last patients for decades again. So I think both of those are exciting. They're probably a little bit behind pharmacologic therapies that could be neuroprotective or enhancing, just because the regulatory pathway kind of breaking the ice on cell and genes is a little bit harder than breaking the ice on a small molecule pharmacotherapeutics. But I think those are very exciting, both in the front of the eye and the back of the eye.
Thank you so much to our moderators, to our panelists. We really appreciate your time.